Hey, it's Karina Reichman, and you are listening to Comes a Time with Oteil Burbridge and Mike Fenoya. If you're digging the podcast, do these guys a favor and review and subscribe. It means a lot. Be sure to follow the pod on social media, YouTube, and if you're joining for bonus episodes and exclusive content, go to patreon.com/comesatimepod and get on the bus. And now, here's Mike and Oteil.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Comes a Time. I'm Oteil from Egypt. I'm doing this one solo today because Mike is doing some really cool stuff that I'm not even sure we could talk about yet, but we're really excited for him, and congrats, Mike, on all the stuff you got going on right now. Today, we have writer and guitarist Allman Paul, who wrote the newest book on the Allman Brothers called Brothers and Sisters. His last two books were instant New York Times bestsellers, Texas Flood, The Inside Story of Stevie Ray Vaughan, and One Way Out, The Inside History of the Allman Brothers Band. He also wrote, his first book was called Big in China, My Unlikely Adventures Raising a Family, Playing the Blues, and Becoming a Star in Beijing, which is really a great story too. He also founded a band called Friends of the Brothers, which is a band that celebrates the music of the Allman Brothers Band, and has had Lamar Williams Jr. and a bunch of people. His latest book, Brothers and Sisters, just hit the New York Times bestseller list. And I've known Allman for a really long time. Met him back when I first joined the Allman Brothers Band. I guess, when did I join the band? In 97. And when we met him, I knew him as the guy that wrote for Guitar World. He's been a frequent contributor to the Wall Street Journal and Guitar World. And so I just knew him as the writer guy that also played and that I thought was mostly friends with J-Mo. And we've had a relationship for a long time. Really good guy. Really glad to have him on the podcast. I'm going to be bringing more Allman Brothers people from Allman Brothers family onto the podcast moving forward this year, now that we're on the new platform with Pantheon. Shout out to Pantheon. And so I hope you really enjoy this podcast, and we'll check you later. But hey, man, it's great to see you, Alan. How's it going today?
Thank you. It's great to see you in this format. Everything's been great. I mean, I've been running around like a mad dog, promoting the book, and it seems to have worked, and people are liking it. And writing a book is a lonely pursuit, sort of like making an album all by yourself, And so when you finish it, you have a little nerves about it, and then it gets out in the world and people like it. So it's like it's a really, really good feeling. I don't know how else to describe it. It's very much like putting out an album, except without a band, and like you did it all yourself. So, and you've done that before too, so you know that feeling.
Yeah. And it's funny that no matter how well received they are, the previous ones are, when you do the next one, you go through the same agony. Like, it's weird.
Yeah, I mean, the one part of it that gets a little easier for me is that when I reach that feeling about halfway through of like, oh my God, what am I doing? Am I going to finish this? The panic doesn't get as intense because I just know, okay, I've done this. I'm going to do it. It's going to be okay. I talk myself through it. It's not like those feelings don't come. They just don't become as existential, at least for me. So,
and it's funny. It's exactly what I tell my kids all the time. And I find myself telling myself the exact same thing. I said, if you did it before, you can do it again, which is true. It's not a lie. It's but like you say, the feelings, they come back, but then I talk myself down a lot quicker,
Right.
So,
Well, it's funny to be on this side of an interview with you, Oteil, because I've interviewed you asking the questions many times. And so I'm restraining myself right now because I have so many questions I would like to ask you about your last year, which is pretty interesting, really. So we're going to have to double back. I'm going to have to find the forum where I can do an interview with you and hear all about the final
well,
Dead and Company tour, because what a wild run it was. The little bit I saw firsthand and the lot that I saw secondhand is just amazing stuff.
well, we could talk about, I mean, this is not really an interview. Like, we don't really do interviews, we just have like free flowing conversations. And I find that most things are related. So,
yeah. Well, let me tell you, I'll take the opportunity. I'm so proud of you, and I'm happy for you. And the very first Dead and Company show I saw was at Madison Square Garden when you did those, like, there was a couple of free shows. I don't even know what year that was. You would know, obviously, but
I don't.
I was just so happy. Everybody was like, "How's Dead and Company?" And I was like, "Oteil is awesome. Oteil's on Madison Square Garden stage. I don't care about anyone else. This is like, Oteil is killing it. People love him. He's like," and so, and I've had a bit of that. I had a bit of that feeling the whole time. So, and I know I'm not the only one. There were a lot of people it was the Oteil show, on some level. I mean, you know what I mean. But
well, all the true
really
like Allman Brothers heads were, I'm sure, but there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah, which of course I got to explore in the book. But I mean, just not just in terms of Allman Brothers or whatever, but just knowing you as a person, and seeing your growth as a person and a musician. It's an amazing story.
Oh, thank you.
Especially the way you came into your own as a singer. It's really cool.
That's great. It has been crazy, but it's something I tell people all the time. I really feel like so much of my life began at 50, which is crazy. But, obviously, because
I feel the same way.
Yeah. It's the culture, the way we've been taught, like the whole best years of my life. And I'm like, that's all BS. Like, my best years are right now. Like, your best years are always right now when you're not in the thick of some horrible circumstance, if you can make it through that.
Yeah, that's what, my first book, Big in China, was a memoir about living in China and raising my kids there. And that's how I felt about that is part of what that book was about, was that I reached this whole new level and I started all these new pursuits when I was not 50, but 40 at the time. But that started me. And if I hadn't done that, I'm sure I would have hopefully got into some other cool stuff. But all the things I've done over the last, whatever it is, 15, 16 years, started from that. And that was something I tried to get that point across when I was promoting the book. I don't know if I did it that successfully. And the older I get, the more perspective I have on that. But, it is a story that people need to hear, that when you're 40 or 50, you can keep doing new things, improving, getting more creative, opening yourself up, taking more risks. I was like a bedroom guitarist all my life, and then I started performing. All and in China. If I hadn't been in China with these Chinese musicians, I wouldn't have felt liberated to do it. But I felt like, the music of the Allman Brothers and the Grateful Dead and B.B. King and Johnny Copeland and Little Milton, this stuff is kind of like holy to me. So when I had the chance to play it in China, I felt like I had to really put myself out there, because I felt this responsibility that I'm introducing this music to people. And so, I don't know, it liberated me in a way. And I don't know how you got liberated to sing like that on stadium stages. It's amazing. But it was a process. Cool, but if you put yourself in the right setting and you take some risks, you can keep opening up new doors. I guess that's what I'm getting at. You did it on a very high level. I did it on a low level that seems higher now because I wrote a book about it, but it's still the same. It doesn't really matter how many people are in front of you.
It doesn't.
It's the same. You still have to take that risk and step off the diving board and, have faith.
I feel just as naked, more scared playing a small audience. Like, I remember our band played this church in Macon, and I spoke at it too. And I was so nervous, man. Like you could see everybody. So the fear is the same. Like your body doesn't know the difference between Fenway and a 50-seat club. Like when it's all over, here's Alan Paul. It's like,
right.
Ta-da.
Right.
And you're like, oh.
Well, in some ways, the 50-seat club can be more intense because if there's one bored guy looking at his phone or crossing his arms, you do notice him.
You'll see him.
The guy's over there like, he ain't that good. And you're like, oh, boy, you see him. Whereas at Fenway, hopefully that guy's behind 5,000 people dancing.
It's just a blob. And, it's amazing how it's a theme in the podcast lately. I call it OI, which is organic intelligence as opposed to AI. But, we're like multitasking, doing all these things at once while we're playing. And somehow we can still scan the crowd and look and find the person that doesn't like what we're doing.
Right.
Along with the other 4 things we're doing at the same time.
Right. Well, and one thing, I mean, also, since we're talking to an audience, I want to take the opportunity to throw out some praise to Colonel Bruce, who obviously was such an important mentor to you. I think that's pretty well documented for people know that. But he also was really, to me, he was fascinated by my experiences in China.
Yeah.
And when I came back, I was sort of tinkering around with writing a book, and I talked to him about it. Not about writing the book. I was just telling him about my experiences. We had this long phone conversation, and he was fascinated by it. He kept asking me questions, and I did think like, okay, if this is really interesting to Bruce Hampton, it's probably pretty interesting to the general public, because he didn't, he wasn't he wasn't blowing smoke. And so when I told him I was thinking about writing a book about it, he was really, really encouraging and kind of egged me on. And I was headed that way anyhow, but I don't know if I would have done it. I was a little nervous. It was a memoir. It felt like so presumptuous to me to write a memoir.
I hear you. I'm in that spot right now.
Yeah. So, but with Bruce telling me how interesting this was, it was a huge encouragement. So, and I'm just one of many. I mean, there's so many people he has encouraged. I got to see Government Mule at Chastain the other night, which was great. I ran into a lot of your friends there backstage and front stage, including Dwayne Trucks. Nice. And Dwayne and I had a very brief conversation about Bruce as well. And then I ran into Kebby, who was back there communing with Ron Holloway. And I just sat and listened to those guys talk reads and stuff, which was so cool.
And, me and Ron Holloway have the same birthday, and I have so much
and
history
my son
with
Eli,
both of them.
And I'm reminded it's coming up August 24th. I always know your birthday because
your son.
You share it with my son. So proud of it that he shares it with you and Ron. 2 excellent souls. So is Eli. Ron is awesome, amazing talent.
Yeah.
And this Government Mule Pink Floyd tour is, Ron is really highlighted. He's not just like a guy in the band. He's very featured, and I'm happy for him.
Good. I have to have him on because, man, his history, has he played with some people? It's like you forget until you hang out with people, like how much they've done. And you're like, oh,
yeah.
Wow.
And any one of the artists that Ron played with would be worth. I mean, especially Gil Scott Heron.
Yeah.
Played with
a
Dizzy
podcast
Gillespie for
just
years.
On that.
Yeah. And you're from DC, so you probably remember Root Boy Slim and the Sex Change Band. Yeah, which is very different than Dizzy Gillespie. But I have friends from down in that area who just Ron is a legend to them for that. I mean, there's all these different people who view Ron as a legend for different reasons.
And they don't know all the different.
Kebby told me he went to Howard music school, and that Ron was the absolute legend among sax players there. So
that makes total sense. That makes total sense, man. For the viewers that Comes a Time fans that don't know, Root Boy Slim and the Sex Change Band, that was the name of it, right? And this is 70s it was called that? Definitely by the 80s, because it got on my radar by the early 80s. I graduated high school in 82. And so we always heard about it. He's just that weird guy. And I'm like, oh, so that was the Colonel Bruce of DC, basically, of Washington, DC.
Yeah. People really loved him. I never got to see him, but
I didn't either.
But I've talked to a lot of friends from down there who did. So again, Ron, Ron is just a fascinating guy, and you can throw him into any situation and he'll make it sound better.
I think it's something really cool about. It's one of the coolest things about Ron that he has that thing where he can go from Dizzy Gillespie to Root Boy, so we could relate on the whole Colonel Bruce tip because that's all he's like. Oh yeah, and he's. I think going back to your point about Bruce encouraging you, he did that for so many people. He was just a catalyst, but it was intentional. Like he knew he was a catalyst. And I have purposely tried to do that now in my life, especially now that he's gone. Like give people that encouragement, like take the dive, what the hell? You're going to find something in that fall that's amazing,
And your involvement in Roots Rock Revival, I think, you've been able to do that really directly with a lot of young people. So,
yeah,
and
thank you for coming to that.
Oh no, man, it's a pleasure. I'm sorry I've ever missed any of them. Butch Truck started that. For those who don't know, I think it was in 2013, right? Because this was the 10th anniversary.
10th anniversary,
and the initial thing it was Butch's concept, I think, and it was with O'Teal and Luther and Cody Dickinson, basically, and then a lot of other people, but you guys were the core. And since Butch's passing, the three of you have kept it up and brought in so many other people, including, of course, Butch's kids, Availor, Melody, and Tab, Brandon, Niederauer came through there. I was there the first year. He was like 9 years old. He gets upset when I say this, but he's the exact same age as my daughter, Anna, and so I know exactly how old Brandon is at all times. But she was playing guitar then and kind of struggling with it. And I was up at Roots Rock, and I took all this cool video of Brandon, and I brought it back to try to inspire her. And I showed her the videos, and I was like, look, this kid is your age, Anna. And she watched it for a while. And she goes, he's my age? And I said, yeah. And she's like, I quit.
I know.
And, it was an actual opposite reaction of what I intended. And Brandon gets so upset. He freaked out when I told him that in a bad way. He's like, I don't want to ever discourage anyone.
Yeah,
that's terrible. I feel awful. He was like, I'll come over and give her a lesson myself. And But I did explain to him that, her heart really wasn't in it. And I think that's what it really revealed to her is she it's not just the skill level. It was the level of passion he had that she didn't have. She has for other things.
And that's okay. Anyhow, I mean, it's good. It's good to find that out. Like with your kids, you throw everything at the wall. That I understand his feeling because I have, encouraged, I don't want to say talk people in, but I've encouraged a number of people to start playing an instrument like in their 40s and 50s as a complete starting from scratch. And I'm just like, look, I always played for fun. It's never too late to have fun. Like why we have this concept like it's too late to start playing music. Like it's just do it for fun.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about Roots Rock is it's such a mix. So you have people who are really pursuing it. You have young people who maybe are contemplating pursuing it, and you have older people, which could mean anything from 25 to 65, maybe
older than that. Because we've had grandparents, kids,
and some of them are guys who played for a long time but never really played with other people and. That's what I always try to encourage people if they're learning is get good enough that you can just find some other people to play with because music, I never had the gene to really practice the way you did and all of my friends who are great musicians. I get that. Like I just missed that. I've done that more with reading and writing. And I've practiced enough to be okay, but I understand that gene, that compulsiveness it takes to really – and I mean, there had to be points, O'Teal, where you played 10 or 12 hours a day, right?
Honestly, there really wasn't. There was one period, and this is something I tell my students and just people in general. I literally always did this for fun. And so I have followed more inspiration, which ebbs and flows. Now, there was this one point where it was like, okay, O'Teal, you're going to have to go to college, get a job, or go to college or get a job and move out. Like so I had to. I told him I didn't want to go to college, and I'm the only one in my family to not go and graduate. And so I was like, well, you're going to have to practice a lot. So at that point, I was practicing 8 hours a day, but I was already good. And my parents knew, like, okay, he could make a career of this. But I just wanted to knuckle down, and I did do that, but it still was all inspiration. Like, it has to be fun for me. If it's work or practice, it's like just framing it that way discourages me mentally. So when it's fun and it's just based on inspiration, then I'll play for 3-4 hours. You know what I mean? Or if I'm writing something.
Every day?
No, hell no, man. Like, I was just laying in the bed snuggling with Nigel. It's his last day before school starts, and he's watching some Minecraft stuff on YouTube, and I'm just snuggling with him. Like, there would be times when I would come home, I would never pull my bass out of the case. I might play banjo or drums, or I just want to play with the kid. I just want to be with the kids, help Jess out with stuff. And then there are times when I'm writing, like right before I did this album, I was sitting at the piano working out arrangements on these tunes. And then it was like new arrangements were coming, and I was just spending a lot of time playing and singing. But it was also cathartic because I was working through a lot of stuff from my dad's death, from Kofi's death, Colonel Bruce's death, Jim Barnett's death. It was like, it all kind of serves a purpose. It's not just, I'm going to practice from 8 hours every day.
Yeah, but Oteil, you do have, I mean, if you just listen to what you just said, you're just like casually talking about playing drums, playing banjo, playing piano.
Yeah.
I never heard you play guitar, actually, which I would love to hear. But
Colonel Bruce used to love to get me to do it.
Yeah, but I mean, you recognize that not everybody, even who are really good at one instrument, have the facility to pick up other instruments and be really good at it, right?
Well, I think they do. See, I think we are kind of brainwashed into this. And that's why I love the idea of you being in China, because it's like it put you in a different frame of mind, right? It frames things differently when you're in China. And I feel like if we could just learn to do that, but stay exactly where we are, which was Colonel Bruce's whole thing. If you just take one step to the left, now everything's different. Your whole, you turn the diamond one so that the light's coming through a different facet. And so if we could all do that, I think people can play a lot of instruments. You notice the people that learn in folk traditions like bluegrass, where you learn to play bluegrass by playing with people better than you. And these other ways, it's like, oh, you can't play with them yet. You're too good. I'm like, that's not true. I could play with a total beginner or a total pro. It's up to how gracious I am about it. But in folk music, that's built in. And in folk music, like bluegrass, for instance, you find that those guys play anything with strings. Like Sam Bush, he plays mandolin, but he kills the fiddle. I bet he can play banjo. I bet he can play guitar. I bet he can play a little dobro. I haven't seen it, but I just bet,
So when you put together your Oteil and Friends bands, since you have, by virtue of the name, you could put anyone in there. And by virtue, if they're on the stage, they're your friend, they're part of the band. What do you look for? Like, are you thinking of crafting? I'm going to put out names who are like you're actually playing with now, but like you say, okay, I have Dwayne Betts, so I should get Lamar to sing with him. Or do you just put together the guys that you most want and figure it will all work? Because you have a core of different people who are rotating through.
I think it's more like it depends what my vision is. Like right now, because of playing with Dead and Company, I want to explore more of the Jerry Garcia band side as far as not my originals. Like we do some of my originals from the Peacemakers from my last album. And then I try to do some originals of the people that I have playing in the band. But like if I could get Dwayne and Lamar, it's like, man, now I can just do mashups of Dwayne's originals, my originals, Allman Brothers band, Jerry Garcia band, Grateful Dead, Colonel Bruce. Like it's all. So I'm trying to like, obviously with Melvin, any chance that I can play with Melvin, I'm going to do it. That puts all the Jerry band stuff on the table and the covers that he was doing, which there's a lot of overlap with covers that Allman Brothers was doing.
Yeah, I mean,
and then, but the rest of it, like I don't have. Yeah,
I have this playbook right here. I mean, this is like anybody wants to learn like a lot of great songs. This Jerry Garcia songbook is incredible. It's his solo repertoire because, okay, now you can get at least your foot into a bunch of different blues, into R&B, into some
gospel.
American standards, Hoagie Carmichael. You can just mess around with that, and obviously you'll take to some more than others, but that like is reflective.
I want to do one that's just not exclusively, but where the main focus is just Jerry Garcia band gospel stuff with Melvin and Alfreda and Roosevelt Collier, right? Oh, yeah. I just think I would kill.
Yeah, and I'm sure, and Jerry would love it. I think I feel. I mean, I feel like he would. How do we?
I think really about that a lot, man. Yeah. A lot more than people might realize. Like especially everywhere. Like this last tour at Roots, there was this one time at Roots this year. We have Amy Helm, who's Levon Helm's daughter, for people that don't know. And she leads a choir there, and they did Melissa, and man, I was just bawling my eyes out. They sang the ending guitar.
That was with our friend Junior Mac singing it, and I have a video of that. Actually, I put it up on my Facebook and stuff. I should put that onto YouTube because I agree. It was incredible. Junior is incredible. Junior Mac, if anyone doesn't know, is a major talent. I play in the band with him, Friends of the Brothers, and I've known Junior for a long time, and I knew how great he was, but I've probably played, 50, 100 gigs with him in the last bunch of years, and being on stage with him every night. In fact, I used to sing a bunch of songs, and I sort of said to Junior, why am I singing when I'm standing next to you? Because I have to remove my ego. I mean, when I started the band, I felt like I had to prove my worth by singing a song or two. But Junior is, it's like, it's okay. Like I don't need to do that anymore. And he's so good. He's really an immense talent. And his combination with Amy and then I know that choir is absolutely stunning, and in fact, really they should record that.
We were talking about that. Believe me, there's a few things that are going to get recorded that just happen at Roots.
I really endorse that. That song is stunning, and it's because Junior is incredible. It's also because Amy is incredible, and she put that choir. And it's not like a radical rearrangement of the song. It's an interesting. Musically for people to think about how you can make a relatively minor adjustment. It's not minor because you're adding a choir, but it's not like the song is radically different. And it brings this whole new dimension to it. And it's just beautiful.
And the thing they did that got me so hard was, and you know this because those licks at the end of Melissa, well, they sang all that, and I start crying now thinking about it. It just got me. I was like, and I thought about, are you guys watching this? I really felt like they were. I really felt like, if I had passed on, and Nigel was down here doing that at Roots Rock, I would be watching. I would be up there like, yes. It was such a moment, man. Like,
and I had just signed a bunch of books before that. And there was a woman who was like the last person who bought a book from me right before that was starting. And she was up there. I was filming it. And while I was filming it, I'm looking through my camera, and then I was trying not to look through my camera, so I was sort of going like this, and then I looked back at my camera, and I realized she was clutching the book to her chest like this as she sang. And I was so touched by that. If anyone sees this video I posted, if you look right in the middle, you'll see what I'm talking about. But that was wonderful. And it shows how these music catalogs, if you approach them with respect, you don't have to. You can mess with them as long as you're messing with them in the right way. It's not a bastardization or whatever. It's just expanding it.
And I've struggled with that. This is a great segue into your book, because I struggle with this in my mind, like you're not playing enough of your own music, and you're doing too many covers of Grateful Dead and Allman Brothers and Jerry Garcia Band. And then as I was working on these Aretha Franklin tunes, because Alfreda Gerald was singing with us last weekend, I don't know whether I saw it. Oh, I actually think it was in your book where you were talking about people that have made big parts of their careers reinterpreting music that was not theirs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that really, it was in your book, because I was reading that on the way to the gigs.
It was in reference to Greg doing These Days, Jackson Brown's These Days on Laid Back. And I talked about that.
And I thought about that. I was like, oh, yeah, like Ray Charles could sing covers all night long, and nobody gives a crap if he wrote it or not, because he's making them so much his own. And so that's what we try to do. Like, like for instance, when we do Liz Reed, I do it like a Latin tune, but I start with the ghetto boom, 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 boom. So that's going back to like Southeast Washington, just my old, black catalog stuff. And then we're doing da da da, playing Liz Reed over that. And then when it goes to the next section, I'm doing like salsa. And so I'm like, yeah, man, just have fun. It's like what I was thinking about on stage with Dead & Company, and I'm not really sure if I'm confident in what I'm doing yet, literally till this last tour. And I remember maybe it was the first or second year. I just asked Jerry, I was like, Jerry, man, I hope I'm doing this right. I hope you're digging it. And I don't know if he was talking to me or not, but I just heard in my head, but just have fun, man. That Jerry way he talked, man, just have fun.
Well, you went to Bob really early, right? In like rehearsals, I think, right? Didn't you tell me this before your first gig? And you said, I don't know if I can do this. I can't really play like Phil. It's against
well, you miss the sound of the Grateful Dead. And when you know what that is, which at this point now I knew what that sound is, and I knew how much a part of the uniqueness and the anomalousness of it, if that's even a word, is Phil Lesh. Then all of a sudden I just like, I can't. Oh, what am I doing here? Then the critic starts, and Bob is like, man, just play it black. And I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. New Orleans, gospel, blues, funk, jazz, black. I was like, I got, and thanks to Colonel Bruce, I got country and bluegrass. I got all the outer space stuff from Colonel Bruce, right? So I was like, yeah, what am I doing? But this last tour, it was so fun. I wish I had done this freaking at least 6 years ago. Since the band is ending, right? I was like, okay, so if this is the last chance you're ever going to get to play this with these guys, F it. Go with exactly what your instincts were. And then that actually, I turned that up to play it like it's the last time you're ever going to play it with anybody. And the last time if the entire planet's going to hear it, like an asteroid's going to hit the planet. Right. And then I just went for it. And I'm telling you, from the first song, the crowd responded so hard, and I was like, and then it just went like this until the end of the tour, and I was like, man, I wish I had done that. But I've really leaned into the funk. Like St. Stephen's, I made like a funk tune, like boom, Stevens, don't, it's not like what it was before. And I could feel the crowd just going berserk. And so it's like I had to let go of the whole thing. It's not Grateful Dead, it's Dead & Company. We're totally obviously respectful and want to keep it going. But I have no choice but to like do it my way, because if I do this in between thing, what is that?
Right.
You know?
So when Bob said to you, play it black, which is funny, by the way, but do you think what he really meant was you're black, be you, like just
Yes.
be
Well, he
Oteil?
said something different that I don't want to say.
I know.
Because,
I think you told me one.
yeah, I have
But
to be diplomatic about it. But that's what that is. You boiled it down to what he said. He was like, you're you. And I think he was way more cognizant of how much black stuff they do. You know, when the George Floyd thing hit, we were all talking about race a lot, and we did this whole podcast on but the premise was, if you take black culture out of the Grateful Dead, what do you have left? Not a whole lot, you know. I mean, you just got to start Xing out a lot of songs out of their catalog, you know.
Right. You have a jug band, which is where they started, you know, but they grew a lot from there.
Which was black to begin, and those were black. So you got to take that out too. Now you got nothing.
You have to. I know. I'm sure you have to be diplomatic about this too. But just saying, another reason that maybe that you had a different drummer, and I think Billy is an incredible drummer. I love him, so central to. But maybe it's easier to take liberties when you're working with someone else. I mean, imagine trying to take liberties on Allman Brothers songs with Butch.
Well, I did, you know,
different.
but Butch made that space for me, and he was so welcoming, as Kreutzmann was. I think it was more of a factor of the young guys outnumbering the older guys. And then also because Jay Lane is from San Francisco, and he grew up in that whole East Bay thing. So he has in his DNA this stuff, the funk stuff that I have in my DNA, the Tower of Power, the Sly and the Family Stone, right?
Right.
And there's this podcast called Stick People, which you should really check out. And it's 5 drummers, and they all were doing legendary stuff by the time they were teenagers. So it's Lenny White, who was with Miles as a teenager, Michael Shreve, who was with Santana as a teenager, Greg Errico, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, who was with Sly Stone as a teenager, Dave Garibaldi, who was with Tower Power, and then also Mike Clark, who was with Herbie Hancock and the Headhunters. Yeah. Jay Lane has all that in his musical DNA. And so we just naturally hook up. So I say, like, that last Dead and Company tour was like if it was Herbie Hancock and the Headhunters playing with Dead and Company, which I would have been too scared to do before the last tour. Like, I did it sometimes, and you could do it with Bill because, you know, if you listen to these old tracks of Bill, they're really funky. And I asked him, I was like, yeah, I don't want to be racist or anything, but how are you this funky as a white guy, you know? He's like, well, my mom's from New Orleans. I was like, well, there you go. If it's like he's heard it, it's in his DNA, you know.
I think this is in my new book, but J-Mo told me there was only 3 drummers he ever enjoyed playing with.
I just read that.
Obviously Butch, and the only other 2 were Bill Kreutzmann and Buddy Miles.
Yeah, I mean, think about those 3. Wow.
Yeah. And
where are the tapes of him and Buddy Miles playing together?
True, yeah. And he told me one time how much he learned from Woody. I think his name's Woody Woodford, who was the drummer in Otis Redding that he played with.
Yeah.
And he was going on and on about how much he learned from Otis, from Woody. And I said, J-Mo, I thought you told me there was only 3 drummers that you ever, I didn't use the word enjoyed. I forget exactly what I said, that you ever got anything out of playing with, I think I said. And you didn't mention Woody. And he looked at me and he goes, no, I said there's only 3 drummers I enjoyed playing with. Which is, you know, a big difference. So he learned a lot from Woody, but he didn't find it enjoyable because there wasn't a lot of room for him. You know, but he learned a lot about keeping the backbeat there.
And Honey Boy.
But I'm curious, you know, when you read the book, because you are in such a unique position vis-a-vis the Allman Brothers and the Grateful Dead, compared to anyone, really. Did that connection between Dicky and Jerry and their musical, did that make sense to you, right? Or did you have to think about it, or was that obvious to you?
No, it's funny you asked that because, and I haven't finished the book. I'm still going through it, but I did, when I was learning, really like diving into the Dead catalog, I would play Grateful Dead around the house when I did not have the bass, because I learned you can learn so much just by hearing it over and over rather than like, digging into it, just have it in the background. And so many times I thought Jerry was Dicky. I was like, wait, is this the one where Dicky sat in? It's like, no, it's Jerry. And Jerry's one of Dicky's heroes, as you mentioned in the book. And it's another reason that I wanted to have Dwayne in the band, because Luther Dickinson from North Mississippi All-Stars, for those who don't know, also does the camp with us. He was like, he pointed it out. He was like, yo, man, Dwayne's the one that sounds more like Jerry than anybody alive right now. And I was like, you're right. And really, he was one of the reasons that I called Dwayne to play with my band, because I was like, what? Because he doesn't have to try.
And he's not trying. That's
not.
What I don't think. I mean, I'd be shocked.
I don't think Dicky was. I think a lot of it. I mean, I know he was influenced by Jerry, but I think there's so many of the same influences, right? Exact same influences.
Yeah, Dicky told me, and he said this in an interview before the interview, like when we were just chatting.
Yeah.
And it was when we started doing columns with Dicky for Guitar World. And so Andy Aladort and I were doing the interview together. And then Andy basically wrote the column. But Dicky didn't know Andy yet. Andy, through this, went on to play with Dicky for 10 years. But, Dicky at first said, when I asked him to do the column, he said, yeah, but I'll only do it with you. Because, they didn't like meeting new journalists and stuff. And
they got burned.
Dicky,
they got burned.
Yeah, they got burned too many times. And I said, Dicky, I appreciate that, your faith in me and everything, but I'm not the right guy for this. Like, Andy's just going to do better. And he was hesitant. So I said, look, we'll do the first one together. We'll do the interview together. And if you're unhappy with it, Andy will leave and then we'll figure it out and I'll do it with you. Because I knew that it was not going to happen, that if I got him in a room, everything would be cool. And that's what happened. But so ultimately I never even listened back to this tape because it became Andy's deal. He did like 4 columns out of that first thing, but I did record it myself. And so during the pandemic, one of the things I did was start digitizing my old cassettes. I mean, actual cassettes. I have like...
I know us Stone Age guys, we still have some of those.
I just reached into a drawer behind me. These are just a handful. This is this might have been it. Dicky Betts lesson 3696. In fact, that was a different one. That's just what was sitting behind me. Anyhow,
that's the year before I started.
I digitized it and I listened to it. And before the official lesson started, we're just talking, and Dicky's talking about Garcia, and he's talking about his influences first. He wasn't even talking about Garcia. He was saying, well, I grew up playing string music. That's what he calls bluegrass. With my family, swing. I played mandolin and ukulele before I ever played guitar and fiddle. My dad was a fiddle player. Family always played. And when I started playing blues and rock, I had the concept to take the bluegrass, or again, he calls it string music licks from acoustic guitar and play them in a rock or blues setting on an electric guitar. And he said the first time I heard the Grateful Dead, I didn't know who they were. I didn't know who Jerry Garcia was. I just heard it. And I said, God damn, that guy beat me to it. He immediately recognized that Jerry was exploring the same concepts. And so he listened to it a bit. And then you were saying you don't know how much he was influenced by Jerry. He quit listening. He told me that. Yeah. He said, well, once I recognized how much he was pursuing the same ideas, I quit listening to him because I don't want to be influenced by my peers. He also said the same things about Santana. So he would listen to those guys and dig them and then put it aside and go back and listen to Django Reinhardt and T-Bone Walker, because he wanted to be influenced by who he considered, his predecessors, not his peers.
And you see this a lot like that. And when inventions happened, because I forget what podcast I was listening to. I'm a podcast head, but they were talking about a lot of ideas come along at the same time. So like when the telephone was invented, right? So you have Alexander Graham Bell, and then I think there was somebody else named Marconi, maybe in Italy. And so they're like, the ideas are coming up concurrently. And then there's a fight over who was first. But I was like fascinated by that notion that it's in the air. And it makes sense because when you think of the influences in common that Dicky and Jerry were tapping into, well, of course it's going to be in the air, just as a function of time. This came along at this time. These people came along at this time and were listening to that and then start from there and build on. So it's not such a stretch to go, oh, well, yeah, why wouldn't people kind of invent or come up with similar, if not seemingly identical things at the same time? It's not like, and who cares?
That's right? One of the things that I felt good about doing in this book is just bringing that Dicky's contributions to light more. Dicky, because of his demons, which are, really well documented, that overshadowed sometimes his incredible musical contributions. And I don't soft pedal the demons or how difficult it was to be in a band with him. There's a story in here that Butch, the blow by blow from Butch about a fight they had in a hotel in Mobile, Alabama, that will turn everyone's hair gray. I mean, Dicky broke 3 of his ribs. He broke his nose. He knocked a tooth out. It seems like he came like this close from beating Butch to death. And, so I don't shy away from that stuff, but that's not the whole story of Dicky. And sometimes people forget that because that stuff is so crazy and sensational. But, this guy who did that is the same guy who wrote Jessica in Blue Sky and played the leads on Melissa. I mean, Melissa obviously is a Greg song and it's a beautiful composition on its own. But what makes it into what it is Dicky's guitar playing. It's just beautiful. It's exquisite.
I remember being on stage with him and, he was up and down like as the Dead were, playing wise. But it was just one of those nights, man, where we did a Blue Sky and he hit the solo and it's how he builds it. And it just went. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're in heaven. And I was like, that is also Dicky Betts. This incredible, serene beauty, serene, liberated. And we all have that. We're all Jekyll and Hyde. I always say, like, people say, I'm God. I'm like, that's fine as long as you admit you're also the devil. Like, we all have, the angel on one side and the demon on the other.
Understand that's true in the broadest sense, but Dicky's versions of those were pretty extreme.
Well, and we all, some are more extreme than others, but you can also see, like, bouncing on the positive side of the scale, like, that extreme that is Blue Sky, Jessica. One of the tunes that I always wanted to do, and that maybe I'll start singing it at 7 turns. That just he had this thing where, and I'm like, oh, that's just sublime beauty, So it's a good lesson about the yin yang the tension that we all have to like, And
7 Turns is a beautiful song, both musically and lyrically. I mean, I think it's that, that and Nobody Knows, which did you ever even play Nobody Knows? Because they quit playing it, right?
I played it.
Greg didn't want to do.
What a great song. But Kind of Bird, to get back to the string music and that whole thing, like tunes like that were, just unique, like, I guess, especially considering an electric and a rock context. But one of the things I'm so glad, and I can't wait to finish the book. My wife is reading it at the same time, so we're kind of like fighting over it a little bit.
I'll send Jess her own version. You should have told me.
Well, you sent me.
You don't have to fight over it.
You sent me the hardback, which we're staying in someone else's house now while we get a renovation done, so I have to go back and retrieve it. But I love this whole learning about Lamar's part because I play with his son. And, Butch said to me one time, and the Dicky part too, like all of it. But Butch said to me one time, he goes, man, I so wish you could have met Lamar's dad. He just has this sweet quality about him that's like no one else. And he goes, but then on the other hand, you do know what it's like because you know Lamar, and I know you're friends with Lamar, and he has that same quality of sweetness that his dad had. And it made me feel so good that I could connect with Lamar Sr. in that way, like, through his son. So and I got to tell you, when I was on go ahead.
No, go ahead. Don't finish.
I was just going to say, when I was on the plane, it was in the part of the book where you're talking about the Dead and the Allman Brothers being together, and Crosby, Stills, and Nash were playing. And so I'm pulling up these tunes and listening to it at the same time. And it was just such a cathartic experience, man, to be reading and having the gaps filled in that I don't know while listening to it.
Thank you.
It was really something. So I'm really glad you did the book to highlight, because when you think about what they went through when Dwayne and Barry died back to back like that, boom, boom. And it's like, how do you even come back from that? And the story of Dicky coming up and Dicky stepping up, Chuck Leavell, Lamar Williams. It's a really, I'm so glad you did this book.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, but I did feel, obviously I covered it in my first book about the band One Way Out, but I only grazed it. I couldn't really get, because I'm covering 45 years. And I do think, both like the resiliency, the psychology of what was involved, the incredible good instincts and luck and whatever to find Chuck, because they weren't looking for a piano player. You're talking about all like prodigies. Chuck was 20 when he joined the Allman Brothers. He was 21 when he recorded Jessica. We know Derek was a prodigy and all the drummers you're talking about, but people don't always think of Chuck that way. But my God, he was a fully formed, incredible musician. And Lamar, that was it's funny because J-Mo from the beginning, from the first time I talked about him until right now, if you called J-Mo right now and you said, what do you think of Alan's book? He'd say, oh, the Lamar book? He calls it the Lamar book. And he was really happy. Lamar, for those who don't know, was best friends with J-Mo when they were growing. They grew up together in Gulfport, Mississippi. So he was really happy that I could bring him to light. And somebody else said the same thing to me. It wasn't, J-Mo would never be that direct, but about that sweetness of Lamar and Lamar Jr., and it's so true. Lamar Jr. is just one of my favorite people, in addition to one of my favorite singers. I did this book release a couple of weeks ago at the City Winery in New York, where Friends of the Brothers, my band, played, and we had Dwayne, Vaylor, and Lamar as special guests, which was obviously incredible because it's three sons, as well as Johnny Statula and Peter Levin. And we were having a great night, but it was, there's a lot going on. So sometimes I'd get a little frantic because I'm in charge of this circus. And I would look over at Lamar, whether he was singing or just standing there playing tambourine or something. And we'd look at each other. And he'd smile at me, and I just would be like, all right, everything's cool. In fact, when I introduced him, I said something like, I want to bring out Lamar Williams Jr. He's a beautiful person or something like that. And then when Dwayne came out a little later, Dwayne walked up to me, and he was whispering in my ear, did you call Lamar a beautiful man? And so I thought, Dwayne was kind of giving me a hard time right on stage. I said, well, here's another beautiful man, Dwayne Betts. They and if you go back a few years when you guys did this, I think it might have been 2017, the summer after Butch and Greg had passed, and you did that tribute at the Peach Fest. Yeah. And you played, and then you gave way at some point to Barry Oakley Jr., another obviously second generation musician, and J-Mo was playing, and at one point Barry was playing, Lamar was singing, Dwayne was playing, and J-Mo was flipping out. And he said to me afterwards, he goes, God damn, they look like their daddies. Man. It was an incredible experience for him. And obviously it is for everyone watching, but imagine it for J-Mo, who played with, obviously, and was close with all of their fathers and had such an intense musical connection.
Yeah.
So,
And Chuck Leavell was
it's
there
really,
too, because I said something to him. I was like, I forget where we had a moment where it was just the two of us. And I was like, man, you know, I don't know about you, but it's kind of freaking me out, like how much Dwayne looks like Dicky when he was young. And dude, Chuck was just like way more freaked out than me because he was there. He was like, dude, it's the spookiest thing ever. you know? And
because it's not just his looks, it's his the way he leans back when he plays.
It's the whole thing. And nobody can do it. Like we just did it night before last, or was it 2 nights ago? Or 3 nights ago, we were, I was playing with Dwayne and we did, I think we did Blue Sky and Jessica. And, you know, when he's doing that solo, you're just like, nobody can do it exactly like that. I mean, I've done it with Warren. I've done it with all these people that love Dicky, you know, but it's in his DNA. He couldn't help it if he tried. And I'm glad he doesn't shy away from it because, you know, it's so hard playing the same instrument as your dad. I always think about Robbie Coltrane, Felix Pastorius, like, you know, the shadows that these people have to live in and what kind of process they have to go to. And then now also at some point, you're going to play your dad's music. I mean, I'm going to ask him to do it.
That's true.
And I felt bad about it.
But yeah, that's true. I mean, Robbie could have been a bass player or a drummer or whatever and pursued music
Matt
without
Garrison.
standing. Yeah, it is incredible. But look at us, Oteil, you know, to end up playing big roles in the Allman Brothers history. You're a black guy from D.C., and I'm a Jewish guy from Squirrel Hill, Pittsburgh. How did we end up in these roles we are? I mean,
I'm sure you heard the Burt Holman. I used to love this, you know. Somebody would talk about the Allman Brothers being racist, you know. He was like, hey, J-Mo's the first one in the band. We had Lamar, Senior, Oteil, Mark Quinones. I'm Jewish. I'm the manager. Like, what are you talking about? Where's the race of Johnny Podell's, the booking agent since the beginning? Like, what are you talking about? You know, it's like we just stereotype people based on their look, which I still did, even with professional wrestlers. I thought all these wrestlers were racist, and that's why I didn't bother paying attention to it. And now the guys that are like, you know, the like most Daytona Beach, you know, just
right.
I just swore Kevin Nash and Jake the Snake and all these guys were but it's the same thing that happened. I'll never forget my sister asked me, and I've been playing with the Allman Brothers for a while, and she was like, Oteil, they're really not racist. And I was like, I swear. I was like, J-Mo's the first one in the band. So we had this, again, it was a cassette to show you how long ago this was. There was an Aretha Franklin cassette that was like a best of. Right, so it folded out the inside folded out into like this 4-page thing, and so we're putting it on, you know, and I fold it out, and there's Dwayne, and I just held it up. I was like, you know? So you can't judge. That's the beauty of America, you know. Like,
and Oteil, one of the things that was really interesting to me in this book is I dug really into the Jimmy Carter campaign and the band's.
I can't wait to get to that part.
And a couple of things stuck out to me. One was the relationship was obviously a relationship of convenience to some extent. You know, like Peter Conlon, who runs Live Nation Atlanta, but wasn't really involved in the campaign, had a good quote about Carter. He said he was not an opportunist, but he saw an opportunity. You know, the Allman was really popular, but it's important to note that he also actually liked their music and music in general. I mean, he had Dizzy Gillespie play at the White House. He had Muddy Waters play at the White House. And the Allman Brothers liked his politics. Yeah. They weren't just doing it because Phil Walden, their manager, told them to, although he did get involved. But what struck me listening to these interviews with Phil Walden and then with Alex Cooley, who was the legendary Atlanta promoter, did the Atlanta pop festivals and a lot of other stuff. Both of those guys expressed really directly that one of the reasons they wanted Carter to become president and even just to become a national figure was because they were so sick of being stereotyped all over the country as racist because they were white guys from Georgia. And, Phil was an uncontroversial figure, and he did some pretty underhanded things. Also was an incredibly charismatic and brilliant guy. Yeah. And he did, his career began because he was Otis Redding's manager. Yeah. And he started first booking and then managing Otis when they were both teenagers. I mean, they were basically the same age. Wow. They were like 17 and they were doing this together. Wow. So he felt this huge obligation to the Black community that they had let him in, and that his career was basically built on that. Everything else that happened started there. And he said this, he said, I would go to New York and get in a cab, and like a white cabbie would say, like, boy, you guys really know how to handle them people down there, because he would hear Phil's voice. And Phil hated it. He was repulsed by it. And Alex Cooley said really similar things, not about going to New York, but just about the associations. And when Jimmy Carter was the governor, he made some steps in that direction. And his predecessor as governor was Lester Maddox, who was one of these like virulent racists. He owned a restaurant and he refused to desegregate the restaurant. In fact, he closed it rather than desegregate it. And when they tried to come do like sit-ins at his restaurant, which, we've all seen pictures of these brave young men and women getting flour poured on their head and that kind of stuff. Well, he took it the next step. He beat them with an axe handle. And that guy became the governor. So that was the vision that people had of the country. So Carter started to change that. And that was a huge part of Phil Walden's interest, and Alex Cooley, who played a huge role. Those two guys really were the ones who conceived of this whole idea. That part of racial, justice, I don't think they would have used that word. That's more of a modern framing, but it's the same thing. That was really a huge part of their motivation. So it's not just an incidental thing like, oh yeah, they happen to have a Black guy in the band. It really was, in their soul. And I am really glad that Greg, I think it was in 2015 in that interview, he said, if the Confederate flag hurts people's feelings, I say burn them all. Yeah. And I think that was really powerful. I'm really glad he said that.
I really appreciate you coming on. I know we meandered all over. We probably should have talked more about the book, but we can always have you back too.
Thank you. I appreciate your support. I'm glad you liked the book.
Oh, I love it. My wife too.
We meander because, whatever. It's different than doing like a regular interview because we like to talk. And it was a lot of fun. And I look forward to hanging. I had one of my, I don't know if people know about the Les Brers band, which put together, after the breakup of the Allman Brothers. And it basically was the Allman Brothers rhythm section. It was the Allman Brothers rhythm section. Yep. It was Oteil, Butch, J-Mo, Mark Quinones with Jack Pearson and Pat
Bergeson
on guitar. And Lamar, Bruce Katz on keyboards, and then Lamar Williams Jr., which was the first time a lot of people heard him. It was a great band, and I went on the road a few times, and one of my most fun times ever in this whole crazy life was riding the bus down to Philadelphia. We were in the back lounge back there having so much fun, and J-Mo leaned over to me and he goes, "Hey man, tape this shit." And so I opened up the recording app on my phone. It's kind of unethical to tape people without telling them you're taping them. So I started to say, "Hey, I'm taping this," and J-Mo smacked me across my chest. He goes, "No one's going to say nothing good if they know you're taping it."
True, right?
I know. So anyhow, I did. I think I sort of half told you all I was taping it. I wonder if I can find that recording. It should be on my phone somewhere. But it was just good times, and we're sort of recreating that here in a less risque fashion because there was all kinds of crazy stories being told.
Well, the beautiful part about it is that J-Mo knew that unlike some of these other journalists, you would have our back and edit out all the stuff that should not be heard.
Yeah, well, that's actually an interesting point because people ask me that all the time. Like, is it weird to cross the line between friendship and reporting? And it can be, but it's not. I mean, nobody believes this, but really, I don't feel like ever in the Allman Brothers world, nobody ever really told me don't write that, or that, I never really got in trouble for things. I'm sure obviously I self-edited certain things, but they were things that just were obviously, and I always told Warren, Warren was the first guy that I really crossed that Rubicon to, where I would start talking to him all the time. And I could tell, and I just said to him, Warren, look, if we're just talking, I'll never quote you. And if you say something in our conversation that I think is interesting, I want to write about, I'll ask you if it's cool. We'll come back and do it. Yeah. And I would say to him also, like, if you say something and you want to retract it, it's okay. Because I think it's important, because you develop the relationship, you get more out of people, but the risk for the interviewee is to say something you didn't mean to say because you felt like you were talking to a friend. So it's not really a conflict to me to do that, because it's in balance. The reader or listener or whatever is getting more out of it by putting that. And it almost never comes into play anyhow. Very, very few times here or there. I saved Butch Verne himself a few times in One Way Out.
Hey, man, we need, because I get into talking about stuff with people, and then sometimes, they'll send me what we did for my approval, and they'll see what I said, and I was like, okay, now it's like it doesn't sound the same written on paper. Like I would be fine. I'm fine with what I said and how I said it, but how it looks on paper isn't right. So I'm like, can we reframe it just so I make sure it's not taken this way and only taken the way that I meant it, right? And that's just about trusting the person interviewing you, which we look at you as a friend, not just as somebody. We look at you as also as a friend, and not just like, a journalist.
I mean, I've always was writing this stuff with the long game. I mean, I saw things backstage at the Beacon that could have made I could have got a story on page 6 or something, but like, why? And then I get like an adrenaline hit for a day, and then I never can. Nobody will talk to me again. I mean, that's not ever why I was in it. And once people realize that's why I was allowed to be back there and see things. So it's just a fine line. But being able to observe so much and just like sit in rehearsals, I would always try to hide from Greg when I was at the SIR rehearsals for no reason. I mean, nobody ever, it's just that he was the only one who could have possibly said, why is this guy in the room? But the only couch where you guys rehearsed at SIR was right in front of him. And so
you wait for him to go, was he?
Yeah, I was always like, is Greg in it? Because I knew everyone else was fine with it. But, I'm literally sitting on the couch directly in front of Greg because, again, it's the only place to sit there. I probably should have gone back and hung out with like Farmer, the guitar techs. But anyhow, I never really wrote about that stuff, but being able to see it and hear you guys talk and work through songs and stop and was great. And it just helped inform my understanding. And of course, what everyone needs to know is it's just like any band you've ever been in since you were 14.
Yeah.
Somebody stops and says, no, the bridge doesn't start there. It starts here. No, the bridge goes to C. You're going to G. I mean, all that same stuff is no different. It's just Warren Haynes saying it to Oteil Burbridge, but it's otherwise the same stuff.
Oh man, it's funny. You're just sorry to get emotional, but I haven't thought about those rehearsals at SIR in a long time. When you get older, you're more cognizant of when you're making history. Like this last tour with Dead and Company, I realized, I was like, this is historic. We weren't even halfway through it. And I was like, okay, this time, the Allman Brothers 40th anniversary was the first time that I realized it was historic while it was happening. But when I think back to those early rehearsals at SIR, I haven't thought about it in so long. It's such a clear image in my mind where you said the only couch is right in front of Greg. Yeah. And it just shot me back to all these memories. And I'm like, wow, dude, I was 32 then. And, I couldn't process. It's the first really big band that I had been in. And it's just too much to process for someone that hasn't been on that level yet. But now, at 58, I can look back on that and just be like, it's kind of mind blowing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But, well, just leave you with one other funny story that you'll appreciate about it's such a good JMO story. First time that I got invited to go into the rehearsal at the Beacon the night before, the Allman Brothers would do one sort of dress rehearsal at the Beacon.
Yes, the night before opening night.
Night before opening day. And I finally, after years, got invited to go in there in some informal way. Nobody ever gives you a formal invitation. It was just like, you going over to the Beacon? Oh, okay. So I go in.
Yeah, since you said, am I coming? Yeah, I guess I can answer yes.
I'm trying to remain really low key again. I'm just kind of hiding in the back, sitting by myself out in the theater in a 10th row or 15th row or something. And I just trying to hope no one notices me. And JMO sees me and he kind of gets my attention and I'm like, and he starts going like this, come here. He's giving me the fingers to come here. So I'm looking over my shoulders like, is there anyone else around here? No, there's no one else. I'm the only person. That's me. So he's definitely talking to me. And I literally, I'm like pointing, me. And he's like shaking nodding his head and he's going like this. So I'm like, all right. So I go up and I walk up and I go through the stairs and I go up onto the stage, up to the drum riser. And I go, what's up, JMO? And he goes, hey, man, you want a coconut water? Yeah, he was
like, I'm trying to hide, man. Why are you calling me out?
He was drinking coconut water and he saw me and thought, hey, maybe Alan would like a coconut water.
It's hilarious because I never pictured you. I never would have thought that you would have been like trying to fade in the background because we were always like, oh yeah, there's Alan, the guy from Guitar World. Like to me, you were like supposed to be there.
Yeah, thanks.
Like, of course,
I was. I did feel that way, certainly at the shows and stuff. But the rehearsal thing was a little different. Like it was years until I started being at that. So I don't know. I don't know exactly when, but and I obviously shouldn't have felt that way, I guess. But maybe that kept me on my toes in a good way. I don't know.
Well, I think because you did feel that way, people can feel it. They feel that you care. They feel that you don't want to be in the way, so which means you're respectful, you're honoring the thing. And so a lot of it's just a feeling, which is why you were there and why you were supposed to be there, And I think about like us kind of coming up at the same time. Really, I always put you up here like, oh, he writes for Guitar World. I'm the guy that nobody knows that just is the luckiest guy in the world that just got this gig. Like I'm nobody.
But until I felt the same way. Like I got hired from Guitar World when I was 24, kind of out of the blue. I became the managing editor of Guitar World just when I was giving up on making a career out of journalism because I had been just struggling to make any money. And so even though I did that and I became pretty established and I did well and I did good stories and blah, 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 I still never lost the feeling like I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I get to come sit in SIR and watch the Allman Brothers rehearse. I can't believe I get to go watch B.B. King rehearse with Jimmy Vaughan for the tribute to Stevie Ray Vaughan, which was another really memorable thing. Yeah, I never lost that feeling of like, wow, this is incredible. And I never felt like it was about me. I always felt like I was there and I had that access because I was representing the readers. And so my job was just to like lay low, take it in and tell other people what's going on and what this is like. And that's why I was there. It wasn't like because I'm such a cool guy, I always tried to keep that perspective. I'm there serving a purpose, which was to.
Well, I think that's why everybody could feel that because, I'm super glad that you said that because that's the key. Other people would be like, well, I'm here with Guitar World or I'm here with Rolling Stone or they're thinking they're representing whatever this flag they're wearing. You're like, I'm here representing the readers.
Right.
That's a different, that's not the ego.
Like got me there. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a beautiful thing. And that's how I felt. Like, I still feel like that, man. And people like, I remember standing on stage with Kreutzmann. We're at a stadium. And he's like, we're in the little pipe and drapes on stage. And he's looking out at the crowd. We're about to go on in about 5-10 minutes. And he goes, "Can you believe this, man?" And I was like, "No, I can't believe it. Like, it's so surreal to me, like playing stadiums and doing all this and playing with you guys." And he's like, I just can't believe it. And I was like, "You've been playing stadiums since the 70s. Like,
Right.
why, it still feel that way?" He goes, "I just never, it just always blows me away that I get to do this."
Yeah.
That's winning right there, man. That is winning. To have that, what you and I are expressing and what Kreutzmann expressed, that's how you do this, man. As soon as you start taking it for granted and being all whatever, you've lost yourself. You've lost the reason you started doing it, because we didn't start doing it for that. I didn't. And so I appreciate that from you. And I'm glad we went long enough for you to say that.
Keep talking. I'll say something interesting sooner or later.
Oh no, man, this is great. We went way longer than I normally do, but I'm like, hey, we'll quit in an hour and put the rest on Patreon for those that want to keep going. But thank you so much, man. It's so great to catch up with you. And I do want to have you back because there's always more stuff to talk about, even with just this book.
Yeah, thanks, Oteil. Anytime, of course. It's an honor to talk to your listeners, and it's just fun to talk to you. So anytime.
Bless you, man. Thank you.
Okay, take care, man. Talk to you soon.